before.
Yeah.
You know, I saw posters around,
Yeah.
like down at Lampier Dunes.
Mm-hmm.
There's these posters, and it's like, hey, find a porcupine. You know, put it on this website, porcufinder.com.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I've never seen one up here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I have not.
Yeah. So it's kind of strange to think like, okay, what are they being studied and things like that. So in this past kind of few months, we're both Cal Poly Humboldt students, and we are looking into kind of what happened to these porcupines.
Yeah.
Where'd
they go?
Where'd they end up?
Yeah.
What are their populations like now? You know, if we haven't seen them in this area, is there a possibility that they were here before? I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but there's that one study that mapped out kind of the change in sightings over time. Kaz, if you want to pull that up. There was, like, when was it? Like, when was...
According to the map that will be pulled up, the sightings really increased in, like, the 50s.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Like, prior to that, like 40s and 50s, they weren't really seen much around here.
Right.
But then if we, like iNaturalist, there's very few sightings in Humboldt recently, so there's some decline that happened in between like the 60s and
there's
now.
the iNaturalist. And yeah, it's like very kind of sparse.
Yeah.
I think the ones that you see in here, they're usually kind of in the foresty ecosystems.
There's a couple like south of Fortuna there.
Yeah, and then you get a bunch kind of in coastal dune, which is really interesting because like porcupines, I don't usually picture them in like walking through sand.
No, I picture them in like giant like redwood forests or like evergreens. Yeah. So
is this just a case of like, oh, we can see them more often in these dune habitats, so that's why they're recording? I honestly don't think so. I think they're making use of this unique dune ecosystem and the type of year-long vegetation that exists in there, specifically on this coast where we're not getting those years of snowfall that other porcupines have to deal with. And I think that's allowed them to persist in these kind of pockets. But as we've seen, as this decline has kind of gone on behind the scenes, I think those pockets are kind of almost hindering their survivability. And that's what we're going to get into today. So we're two Cal Poly Humboldt students, and we've kind of looked in to try and uncover the mystery of what has kind of happened to the North American porcupine in Humboldt County. This is a porcupine. Erythison dorsani. There you go. You got it. So there's only one species of porcupine in Upper North America. No, there's multiple. There's more than that.
There's some.
Kaz, pull up how many species of porcupine are in the U.S.
I think before,
because there's the hairy.
But those are like Central America. They may get to like Central Mexico, but like Canada, U.S., Northern Mexico, I think it's just North America.
Right. But these are like second biggest rodent that's naturalized, you know.
After
don't count nutria. Nope, they don't count. But they're pretty unique animals, you know. They're all super unique for their keratin quills. And I think there's some kind of common misconceptions about the porcupine too that were kind of debunked.
Yeah, I've heard that they shoot their quills out of their backs.
They don't do that.
Dang.
Yeah, they're very defensive, you know. They kind of hunker down.
Yeah.
They'll maybe like slap you a little bit, but
they're not shooting it out.
They're not shooting it out. Okay. They don't shoot out. They do come out as opposed to like a hedgehog, you know. But they're pretty. I mean, they're rodents, you know. So they're gnawers with their big two incisors. So North American porcupines, they've got super unique keratin quills that they kind of build from their bodies, and they even have them as babies.
Yeah.
So imagine that. That'd be
painful.
That'd be painful. But they're not like the big old quills that you see in like the African crested porcupines. I think many people think of the African crested when they think of a porcupine.
Yeah.
So if you pull up just like a normal porcupine picture, they're like they're just kind of cute little guys,
Yeah.
you know? I think the ones up here are kind of interesting. They have kind of a lighter color to them, honestly.
Pictures, yeah.
But yeah, their utilization of this kind of local dune habitat is pretty unique, but I mean, they're a seldom seen, solitary kind of roamer.
Yeah.
But when you see them, they kind of just stand around.
Yeah, they're not.
They
kind of just walk around. They're not very fast, obviously. Because their main defense is just sitting there and waiting for you to go after them, and then you realizing that was a poor choice.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that can cause some, like, a bit of conflict, too. Like, I think dogs...
Dogs, for sure.
Farmers get mad if their dog gets into a porcupine.
I know, I've known people who've had cows, and they've gotten face full of quills and porcupines, so it's like, you or your animals are getting hurt.
So they kind of get a little bit of a bad rap for that, I would say. Like, they're not a huge threat. They do gnaw on wood.
And that could be an issue with timber.
It could be an issue with timber. I've read some studies where it's like, having a big, kind of large effect. There's some persecution there, too, though, just because, like, Kaz, if you could pull up that image of kind of what their gnawing damage is. So they're eating the just, like, slight intercambium. So
they're not going deep.
They're not going deep. They're just crunching back at just the slight into the bark. They also, though, will eat kind of human things. Like, this is one, I think, who's eating a porta potty. Yeah, just gnawing on that.
You want to pull up the video of the one eating the shed?
Yeah. There's one cat eating a shed. But they kind of do that for, like, the salt of it, too, a bit sometimes. There
we go.
Yeah, here's one.
Video.
But again, this is kind of more in upper middle North America, Canada. I like this video. It's cute.
How you doing?
Very angry.
Yeah, but you see in that kind of defensive, they're just
he's not going after you. They just
You sniffing me? It's okay.
You see his quills go.
There's the quills.
Yeah.
Pretty important. Also, what's pretty cool about them is kind of their interspecific interactions.
Yeah.
Like what role they play in the ecosystem. You know, they're eating kind of green vegetation in the summer. Then they're typically moving to a more hardwood or cambium food source
for sure.
And bark, because I mean that's
especially in like the more northern areas where there's snow and less vegetation. That's all you have.
Yeah, things like that. Like that's all they can find in those kind of weathers. But down here, they're not doing too much of that. So a lot of the kind of persecution for the wood eating has been found to be not a heck of a lot true. I don't know the last time you've seen a porcupine eating redwood.
No, I've never
I don't think I've ever seen one. I don't think there's any record of that happening.
It might happen, but I mean,
it might happen.
Not enough to warrant any major issue.
Any major issue, for sure. Because, they're mostly going after willows, Doug fir?
Some Doug fir, and a study done by a graduate student, or one of their thesis, found that they go after shore pine and California wax myrtle during the winter. Okay. So they're going after those, near shore, smaller trees. They're not really, there's not really much record of them going after, large redwoods.
Yeah, for sure. And they're nocturnal. They're living up in the trees or on the ground. I think they're roaming around kind of where they can get to, but I think staying up in the trees specifically during the daytime,
so
where they're
avoiding
predators. They're great tree climbers. Yeah. Like you can see even from that, they got all the way.
And that's a tiny tree
up there. If you pull up a picture of that scat cache, they just. So they'll get into a tree, and then because they're just in that tree, just kind of gnawing around it, eating all of it, they're also just pooping on the bottom, which is crazy. So that's your kind of tell true sign that there's a porcupine around, if you're seeing stuff like that. Yeah. But it's pretty rare that you're seeing anything like that, specifically up here, because their whole behavior seems to be fairly different than what we're seeing in other parts of the country, which I think makes it really study to see what is happening to this current population, what are kind of the studies done into it, what research is being done to try and figure out where they're at now.
Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing one as we're driving to school?
Yeah.
So we're talking about that kind of predator defense. What they're kind of defending from, I would say they could be taken out by a bear potentially, but I think bears avoid them for the most part. Mountain lions usually avoid them, but
there are some records and there's some videos that we can pull up in a minute that of mountain lions.
There you go,
going after porcupines.
So this is a little graphic, I will say, but this is a dead porcupine that this guy found, ripped into by a mountain lion. And specifically went through its belly, because they've got the quills all in their back.
You're not going over the quills.
So if you flip them over,
it's like a turtle.
Yeah. But I feel like it would take a lot for kind of the species, different like mountain lion species, to learn to do that.
Yeah.
And to have, there's the whole.
They're graphic.
It's wild. So yeah, potentially bears.
Potentially mountain lions too.
I don't know how. I mean, if they're smelling a porcupine and they're like, it's not going to be too fast, you could see it.
Yeah.
But that to the degree, don't think predator increase. We've gotten increase in mountain lions, increase in bears. Don't think that's what's causing our porcupine decline, because I don't think it's.
I don't think they have enough prey.
Degree. Yeah, exactly.
They have enough other prey.
They have enough other things, and it's not like an overlap of those areas where we're seeing both decline. It could be a possibility though. Then also though, their number one predator
is fishers.
Not either of those. Fishers. Little Weasley guys.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
They're little terrors. They're like really good at going after porcupines and flipping them over and doing what the mountain lion did, but they're 10 times as good.
We tried to find a video of one actually ripping into it, or at least a game camera of in the kind of same area and things like that. We couldn't find it. I don't think fisher and porcupine attack has ever been recorded, as we know yet. But this is one of kind of the evidence that the reason why we know that this interaction is happening is through things like this, where you can find. Well, if you guys can see this, there's some quills, and you can see the paw prints of the fisher.
You can see the fight.
There's the fight. All kind of a rustle tussle there. There's some of them just kind of tracking and following each other. So that's some of the ways we know that interaction is happening, as well as scat analysis of the fishers. And it's pretty easy if you're seeing a quill in there. Those probably don't digest too well. I imagine they're not eating a ton of quills, but I bet it happens. Yeah, But yeah, really unique animal in that sort of way. So we kind of took it upon ourselves to see what information we could gather, and also see if we could find them in the area. So where did we first start? You want to tell us?
So we, I guess, initially wanted to look at porcupines because we had seen those signs at the local state parks and beaches about how there are diseases potentially running through the populations here. And because we hadn't seen them, there's a lot of studies on other more charismatic species like fishers or bears or deer. So we kind of want to figure out what's up with the porcupines here.
Yeah, and there was those. So there's a lot of studies done about, I want to say 8 years ago, probably.
Roughly.
Done by Tim Bean, former
Humboldt professor.
Humboldt professor who had a bit. Oh, there's Tim Bean. He had a bit of grad students, and they were trying to do some porcupine research and things like that. He's down Cal Poly SLO now. So couldn't really have that resource of him, but we wanted to see kind of where that had gone, because we hadn't seen many updates or anything from it, which was pretty interesting. And then I've seen the posters around. I don't know if I've already mentioned that, but that was pretty interesting to see and be like, I've never seen a porcupine up here yet, let alone evidence of them. I went on tour in Lampier Dunes, and they were saying, oh yeah, we saw them one portion, but that disease that you had mentioned, you also mentioned that. If you want to pull up, so the Porcupinder website is no longer in operation.
Not active.
And I don't imagine that it got too many finds either. Because, again, in this dune habitat, even at this time, there may have been some, but from what we can tell from, like, iNaturalist data, it's been a while, and the ones that are usually, like, incident roadkill.
Yeah, it's been a while since they've been super populous, it seems like.
Yeah, so it was just a Google form, and we had to way back it. But it was just like, oh, if you saw a porcupine, just submit it, some citizen science stuff.
Yeah.
But I bet it was definitely less than the otter citizen science that's happening right now. So we were looking into that some. We were like, okay, so they're in the area, potentially, or at least were. Yeah. Kind of, where's our next step? And yeah, iNaturalist is usually a go-to. Let's see where we can find different porcupines. Who are we trying to get in contact with?
Yeah, what's some good areas to look?
Yeah. So we looked up at iNaturalist, if you want to pull that up, the iNaturalist data. And yeah, they're pretty interspersed, kind of just around. But then there's that big old patch up in Crescent City, that dark red. And that turned out to be Tolowa Dunes State Park. You look through there, and it's like not only are there a decent amount of entries of people who have found them, they're also
really
recent.
Yeah.
They're around, they're not dead.
They're alive, they seem alive and well.
Walking around porcupines. So that was our kind of first clue as to where we might be able to find them, where kind of that outreach should go into. And our study of kind of the natural history of the porcupine in this area. Then, while we're looking into this, apologize for the scuff setup. As we're looking into this, we also are both part of Conclave.
Yep.
So Wildlife Conclave, it's a pretty cool class. We get to go join Conclave. We get to go to the National Wildlife Society meeting,
the Western Section meeting, which is the one we went to in February. In Sonoma County. Yeah,
in Roanoke Park.
And
so we weren't looking for porcupines there, but lots of wildlife people go there,
including Tim Bean.
Bean was there. We saw him, and we're kind of, there weren't any talks on porcupines that we could find. But we were like, okay, this is a good contact. Let's see if we can talk to Tim Bean. He was running around doing all sorts of stuff. But from what we heard from someone who mentioned it, our Professor Micaela, was like, Tim Bean, not currently doing porcupine stuff, probably won't be the best. But there's him doing porcupine stuff.
He's so big there,
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the work that he does in a bit. And then we were also doing research, looking into papers, looking into Tim Bean stuff, because he's got a lot. Let's go into what all Tim Bean has done. Because he had the grad student lab where they would go up. Turns out it was up in Tolowa as well. So it's all happening in this one pocket.
Yeah, and they did a lot of like diet and habitat analysis mainly.
Yeah, so they put radio collars on these porcupines to see kind of where they were going, what habitat they were selecting for this super unique ecosystem where becomes like a snowy, where they're having to...
It's not a typical, what you think of a typical porcupine habitat.
Exactly. So they put collars on them, they had some maps of like where they were going, but they're porcupines. They weren't moving a ton of places. It was very much like you could see some of that change, but again, the study didn't happen for super long to see anything too groundbreaking, but at least in that part, I don't know.
They did find some that during winter and summer they preferred different habitats and diets.
Okay.
But they found in winter they found they were more going after shrubs and shore pines closer to the shore, and then in summer
fruit.
Forbs and grasses may be an important but seldom used food source for porcupines during the winter.
Okay, interesting.
So it definitely does vary from even though our temperature ranges and our climate isn't as varied as in Minnesota or somewhere up north, they definitely do change their behavior and their diet.
Yeah.
by season.
Right. Which, yeah, that's still pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was a good kind of look into what makes this population subset kind of differently, or what makes it kind of different, because Talo Dunes is quite neat.
Yeah.
So our plan was to go check those out, see if we could find it on our own, but we're out here in the wildlife conference.
Rowan Park.
We're walking around. We'd ended up doing some research before, and we're like looking at porcupine stuff.
Yeah.
Happened to cross this guy, the so-called porcupine whisperer that he claimed himself.
Yeah.
But a local celebrity named Griff Griffith.
You might know him.
And so we found that was like one of our first insights into like, oh, porcupines are in this area. You know, he's doing stuff in Redwood Park in Humboldt County.
Yeah.
And if you want to pull up his first kind of video
that we initially found that helped us launch more towards Talo Dunes.
Exactly. We saw this video, and then we're out doing conferencing stuff. Like, we're not too focused on the project. And look around the corner one time in a big talk and see the back of the head, and I'm like, Joseph,
that's
Griff. I think that's Griff Griffith. We should go talk to him, the so-called porcupine whisperer, and see where he's seeing porcupines. Yeah, you want to put on that video.
Yeah.
So we see the back of his head. And then I'm sitting later in the alumni meeting, so I see him once. I was like, oh, I should have gone up and talked to him, but it's busy. That conference went so fast compared to the other ones, too.
100%.
And he saw one in his backyard.
Yeah.
And we go to the alumni meeting, and then he introduces himself, and he's like, I'm Griff Griffith. So then we're like, oh, it's him. It's him. And we go around and like everyone introduces themselves, and then like we do some of the other alumni meeting stuff, and he ends up disappearing. We lose him. We're like, where'd he go? No, we're gonna talk to him, see where he saw him. And I ended up leaving the alumni meeting room, and then I see him just like hanging out, talking to somebody else just out in the hallway. And so I go up and fill water up, and then I like go up and walk over. I'm like, hey Griff, I know your TikToks. I'm doing a project, Porcupines. Is that easy? I was just like, hey, where do you see him at? And then he's like, right in my backyard. Come up and see him. Come up to Taloa. And I didn't realize that this was Taloa at first. And then it kind of connected the dots like, of course it's Taloa. That's where everyone's seeing. That's where they're seeing. This crazy population is just existing here and doing fairly well in this one area, as we can tell. You can go ahead and pause that video. I think he's just talking more facts about porcupines. Great video. Highly suggest it.
Go follow his TikTok.
Yeah. So he invited us up there. We were able... He doesn't live there currently, but he did live in like the state park bunkhouse type of a deal, housing up there. So we go up, and he gives us the grand tour of the area, which is super unique, super beautiful, super like just important place, like historically too, And we go through, get the tour. If you want to pull up, we got some pictures of some of the stuff we saw. I wasn't too focused on like just photographing everything to kind of get the general idea, but we saw skunk, opossum. There's an opossum in there. But this whole time we're walking around, just giving us a tour. There's elk out there. There were snakes out there. We're trying to gather evidence. Like, okay, let's try and see if we can find some porcupine evidence. We found some scat. Could be porcupine.
It's hard to tell.
Pretty, it depends. I think it's porcupine scat.
I don't know if I agree. But
Okay. There's we can compare it a little bit. But there's this mushroom that had a bite out of it. Could have been a porcupine.
Potentially, yeah.
And then maybe that's somewhere they were chewing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
What else would that be?
Yeah, I don't know. If you want to pull up that other scat to compare, it's like, it was very gray comparatively. Chris is just holding it. Anyway, But yeah, it's made of like woody stuff. But that one was like sitting there for a while, so who knows?
Who knows what it?
Who knows what it could have been?
But we did find more.
Some great confirming evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you can see, that's the porcupine front paw. We got a good track plate there, and then the big old claws, and it was so pristine, so nice, and we were able to take that back with us. And then we also did some hiking as the night progressed, beautiful. We heard the sounds of songbirds, and we're talking with Griff, he's helping us out, pointing in us which way to go.
Yeah.
And he's like, they come up from the backyard sometimes, but then they're also down this path. So we go down this path.
Yeah.
And we're like not having too much luck. Like I don't want to say we're a little bummed that we're not seeing them, but we're a little bit like okay, it's getting close to the end, and we start walking ahead, and we're just going and with our flashlights, and we kind of hear some gnawing. I wouldn't say it was gnawing.
Yeah.
It was like a bit of a chew.
It's not like a normal animal noise you would hear at night.
And it's up in a tree, kind of directly in front of us, and we hear it, and we're kind of judging the situation. I immediately go in.
Yeah, you dove in.
I dove in a little bit. I was like, okay, this is a chance.
Yeah.
I've got the camera, I've got a flashlight, we'll see if we can see him. I jump it, it's like very heavy brush.
Yeah.
Get into there, and then I kind of just hear more like scuttling, which was interesting because I'm like, okay, for a
something
porcupine,
small wouldn't make that much noise. I remember we were there and it sounded loud.
It was
like
big. Things were falling down, and there's definitely movement up there. But I didn't get like a good look, didn't get a good picture. But it was a porcupine.
I think we
think it was a porcupine.
Almost certainly. What else could it be? Like the gnawing and the size.
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna go out there again, see if we can find another, but I'm pretty happy with kind of that whole expedition.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a really cool place, and a lot of what we were kind of taking note of was like the natural history of the area. Like how is this kind of different than the dunes back here where we're not seeing porcupines, where you would expect like a healthy population to be moving and dispersing in and out of different populations, whereas here we just see this, and as Tim Bean's study showed, they're just staying up in that area.
Yeah, mainly Taloa,
and kind of that bridges to our kind of next idea is like, okay, what are the things that people have found about the species, and what are kind of the theories of like, is this population decreasing? Is it at risk? What are the current conservation issues regarding the North American porcupine?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're comparing these two areas of like, okay, Taloa Dunes, we saw some pretty easily, pretty readily.
Yeah.
Down here where I walk the dunes so frequently, and I've seldom or if ever seen any evidence of a porcupine. And, I don't know, there might be some people who have seen one passing through, but it's not a stable population that we were seeing in Taloa.
Yeah.
And that's concerning to me. At least it kind of stands out as when a species is fragmented like that, it becomes more at risk, you know?
Yeah.
If there's not a big population established here and there's just one in there, that makes disease more possible, inbreeding, more heavy impacts, like if there's a fire flood, an off year, all of that will hit this population harder.
Yeah.
And when looking at these two areas, I think there's a few things that we kind of concluded were a little different. I think the first one and most obvious is that it's larger.
Yeah.
It is more connected. The Taloa Dunes State Park is, I don't know how big. It's not like massive, but it just extends across the coast a lot longer. And it's not extending with a bunch of trails and like easily accessible.
Yeah, especially the beaches here, they're pretty small and like fragmented. Like they're decent size, but like compared to Taloa, where it's just one central location where there's like less development, I think it really helps them.
It extends inland more, so it's protecting a forest habitat as well. We're down here, we end up getting into the bottoms and like farmland
pretty quickly,
where things like roadkill is more likely,
or interactions with humans,
dogs, any type of persecution in that sort of sense. And there's also difference in potential food availability, I would say.
Yeah.
I think the size of trees and vegetation is a lot different up there.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot different, but it's just like you reach patches of like bigger forest and like bigger even grasslandy meadowy areas.
There's more, it seems more vegetated up in Tolowa compared to the dunes here where it's mainly just dune and some shrub.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem like great habitat for
porcupine. Like you can get into the areas where it's a little bit better, but then you get into the Ammophila, which is the invasive beach grass, and it's like I can't imagine that.
I don't think porcupines would like that much.
Yeah, super well compared to the smaller stuff. And again, they're not in the like open dunes, but just that sub dune right before
the dune like forest,
right?
Shrubby forest,
and that is so much present in Tolowa, and it's really neat to see that protection of that place. And then beyond that,
I think one thing that we've kind of touched on is roadkill is another thing.
Can we get into roadkill?
I think we could do roadkill.
Okay, we can get into roadkill.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Do a picture. Oh yeah, I guess that's a picture.
As I'm crossing the road.
Yeah, so obviously like we've touched upon a lot, their main defense strategy for any sort of threat is just to hunker down and put their quills out. But that obviously is not going to work for a however many ton ball of steel moving towards you at 60 miles an hour. Their roadkill is definitely an issue. And I think especially down here, it could be a reason because of how developed it is, how populous.
Right.
There's so many roads. Well, the 101
cuts through.
It definitely cuts through near Tolowa, but you're further towards the coast.
Right.
So
and like Old Samoa.
Samoa,
Samoa Road,
all those.
There's definitely more roadways, and I think it's apparent when you look at what people are seeing on a naturalist is it's a lot more just, oh, I found a dead porcupine by roads. So when there was because there was a population in here.
Yeah.
I think that initial study that we've seen pop up a lot of tracking their population numbers, and it saw it more low like earlier in like the
in like the early 1900s, and then in the 40s, 50s, it increased, and then it's kind of hard to tell past the 70s what if it seems like it's decreased, but we have not any certain records because all the records that we have of that are considered recent are also it's more reflective of more research to collect records, and it could be a record from the 1970s that someone found in 2012,
Yeah.
So.
And it's also like where they're collecting data from, you know, and like now is that citizen science has existed, there's just more able to find them. So I would say, even though that one paper, who wrote that paper?
That was Tim Bean was one of the authors, and a lot of...
Do you want to pull up the second map?
It's one of 3 different...
Yeah, and they mention it in the study too. Hey, this isn't an idea of like...
So you can see a bunch right there, but they, in the paper, if I can get to it, they state that the high number of occurrences since 2010 is reflective of efforts to collect porcupine records and should not be taken to represent population trends.
Yeah.
So.
And I think instead of like a population trend, you can see more of like a dispersal in area and occurrence trend, which is where things seem to be more spread out, got more condensed as things like logging increased, so persecution for logging,
development, just general development
in general, and then maybe finding these pockets of stable habitat. I think old growth is one thing.
Yeah.
I know there was a study done by Charles F. Yoakum that said, so this guy, he was like a botanist and did other stuff in Crater Lakes.
And he was also a professor at Humboldt.
And so he his main kind of claim when it went to porcupines was that they were existing, that we kind of saw a boom in porcupines as logging increased.
Yeah.
And his prediction was like, okay, a log falls, they're eating the log that fell.
Yeah.
And that's an easy food source, and they're able to kind of reproduce and like hide in these logged areas. And now, I don't necessarily agree. I don't know what you think.
I might disagree with you.
Okay.
Because I think, like you said, like they do consume like cambium.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense as these trees are more easily accessible to the porcupines, they'll follow the logging.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I think because I don't think this is necessarily a like, okay, logs, more porcupines. I think that population increase we're seeing was more just an increase of being able to see them.
Accessibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they're in the area and you're looking out at a more log cleared.
Yeah.
And you're seeing more porcupines.
That
There's
makes
also
sense.
more of a focus on them if you're logging, and people
if
are
you
like,
think they're a threat.
oh, they're a threat to our quality of timber.
Yeah.
So we got to take them out. But there was definitely, even at that time, a lot of records of their sightings as seen there.
Yeah.
And then that has kind of condensed to these kind of interspersed areas. Yeah. And yeah, this isn't a population that's like going down worldwide, but it is like,
it's interesting to see, especially up here, how the population trends.
Yeah, and their natural history and like what people are thinking about porcupines. And I think right now people are oblivious to
they're not super charismatic.
Their existence up here.
Yeah.
And I think they need to be aware of that, you know?
Yeah.
And then as far as other studies go, there was the research done by Tim Bean. So this was a Tim Bean paper.
Yeah, he was a co-author.
Yeah, and then there was another paper done, which we had touched on briefly, but the kind of diet and stuff that he found. And then, they were also, putting on tracking collars and things like that. And then that's pretty much it as far as research on them goes in the area. Yeah. Like the rest is just kind of what we have seen. I think another thing, this is kind of interesting. The zoo had a porcupine for a bit. Dorsey, R.I.P. She died 2022. Yeah. But she was a porcupine recovery actually up in Tolowa. Who was hit by a car.
And she wasn't able to be released.
So that goes back to kind of the threat of cars and roadkill on this population. But she was unable to be released, so she had the home at the zoo for about 10 years. So good age for a porcupine. Yeah. You know, she lived a full life.
No fishers to go after
her. And yeah, so that's also that gave some porcupines some recognition in the area, I feel like, and that story of, hit by a car, that's a big concern. Then also up here, I had time to take a drink of water. But porcupines they've kind of just been out of the mind's eye, and I think a large proponent of that is, hey, we're not seeing them around.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. So I think what that boils down to, and what we have kind of accumulated to, is, okay, there's several theories, there's several papers that say different things, but, like, what do you think where do you think they went,
I think it's, like, I think everything in ecology is super complex, so I don't think it could be boiled down to, like, one thing wiped them out. I think it's a combination of potentially disease.
Okay.
Like, you've seen the posters out in the beaches.
Yeah.
So I think that can be, like, a silent but quick thing. Like,
right.
That's, like, not noticeable to, like, the general public.
Yeah. And the small
if it's already small population, and something goes through
in this dune habitat,
then yeah, it's easy for them to go unnoticed. But I think it's disease, potentially the increase in development. We're more populous in Humboldt County and then near the bay compared to up in Crescent City, and all the roads that crisscross the county.
Yeah.
But I guess it could also be. I guess my theory is that because there's been a decrease in, I guess, more unregulated logging.
Okay.
And more sustainable quote unquote logging, that their populations have declined because of that, because there's less access to easily accessible food.
Okay, so because
logging has become more less. It was a huge boom in the 60s, 70s. Now they're still obviously logging here, but it's not as big as it was, and it's more. The practices are different in how you cut trees down, where you're cutting them down.
So the logging kind of 20th century, you think was better?
In terms of porcupine population? Sorry. In terms of porcupine populations, I think, because there definitely seems to be some sort of boom in the middle of the 1900s, middle of 20th century.
Okay.
But again, we've kind of discussed about whether that was an actual increase or whether it was just because of increase in being able to see them.
Yeah.
Or just availability of data. I think as logging practices have changed since the 70s, that could have caused a decrease too.
Yeah.
So I think it is a combination of disease, development, and different logging practices.
Okay.
So what about you, though?
I think my main thing is, I think the way, I think disease and that persecution is all having, an increased effect in the modern day, but I think that's more due to the limiting of their condensing of populations in certain areas. I think we see that large population in Taloa. I think there was a larger population here in Humboldt County in the dune system.
Yeah.
But I think porcupines are it's more about their behavior and
they're cryptic,
their way that the species is and how they protect from predators. And it causes a population that's very susceptible to not dispersing a ton.
Yeah.
They're not traveling large ways, and if they do, they get hit by a car.
Yeah.
Because they're just hunkering down, thinking it's a predator, and then they get run over.
Yeah.
You know? I think they have found these pockets of dune habitat where food availability is high, where it's a year-round high food availability, and there's less persecution from logging and even predator attacks like bears or mountain lions. And it is kind of a bit of a safe haven, but I think that's come at a cost, and that's what we've seen in this population in Humboldt County.
Yeah.
I think that population, since it was condensed to this dune habitat, where sure it was doing well, they were still not dispersing, and it was not like what the population could have been across the entire coast, where it was more dunes, more around, and more of that inner dune habitat, where they had those I forget the trees, but
those coastal trees.
Coastal trees that are
shrubs.
easy to climb, easy to chew out the cambium of, and also those fruiting things too. They'll eat corn. Put that video of them eating corn. I love that video.
That's a great video.
But they in these pots.
You can just have that.
Turn the volume down. Yeah. Just have that in the background of them eating corn. That's Teddy. But their population in Humboldt County was just more affected by things like disease. So they'll get mange. I think it could have been mange that sped through.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's also a video of one getting a checkup with mange, but they'll get skin kind of illnesses like that. But then also just less genetic variability in the small population, and then you get the males are dispersing and they get hit by cars.
Yeah.
You know, and then they're not able to breed in the population, support the genetic flow, and then there's more susceptible to genetic.
Like inbreeding.
Yeah.
So you think the isolation is like the big number one?
I think the isolation is the big thing, and I think that does come with development. I think it comes with all those things that we're seeing in so many mammal populations across the world, and that especially makes me worried for the population up in Taloa.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's big. Like, I think there's a lot.
Self-sustaining.
I think it's self-sustaining.
It's for now.
It is for now, exactly. But if there's not a lot of genetic dispersal and crossing of different populations, there could be risk of a disease outbreak up there.
Yeah. Can you pull up the iNaturalist map one more time just to see the population? Because that's the biggest population in the area, but there were some other populations in like Oregon. It looked like
Oregon. There are some out in Hoopa,
like up there, like Coos Bay.
Yeah.
But those seem to be decent populations, but they're so far away.
Yeah, and as the study done by Tim Bean showed that there wasn't that huge amount of movement, you know, and I think those kind of one-off spaces could be dispersing populations, but it's difficult to say and put one cause to it. But I think it really shows how complex this issue of conservation is,
especially mammals.
Especially mammals, where there's so many different factors at play. But it means protecting the things that we know will help them.
And doing more research too.
Doing more research. I think that, there hasn't been a ton on the species, but we focus on the species as a species level.
Yeah, we don't. And most of the other research has been done out east where conditions are wildly different.
Yeah. And I think that more natural history observation of what is this population like, Like, I think it would be incredibly difficult for someone who's looking at populations of porcupines in eastern United States, up in, like, even Canada, to be here and treat that population the same, even though it is the same species. Like, there's just such a difference in food source.
100%.
But there's still those kind of same lying, behavior of this is a porcupine.
This is what it does.
Right. And that comes with kind of observation and stuff that we were able to put in, not super officially, but I feel like that was a good kind of look into what we could gather into a species, how we could connect with other people, the amount, applying research. Like, we found papers and things, and then we were like, hey, we're lucky to be in the same room with some of the people who wrote these. And
that citizen science too is really important. That Porcufinder that is now defunct. I think it could be important to somehow incorporate that again, because it's an interesting population.
Even up in Taloa, and getting more people using iNaturalist or things like that. Because that's where we first went. Was that just general kind of data. Which really kind of speaks to how conservation is changing in the modern day. Is before it was people like what was his name?
Yoakum, it's
Yoakum just doing
was
some
written in
naturalist...
1971. So that's back then if you reported a porcupine sighting, you're going to a fish and game office, or it's word of mouth, or if you're a biologist, the regular me or you isn't going to be able to find much information about porcupines.
Right. And I think that's makes it so important to be able to provide kind of this information on conservation and reaching out to more people so they can kind of learn what is happening to different species around them and especially species like the porcupine, where it's like, oh, didn't even know that this existed in Humboldt County.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people knew that we had a thriving population, you know?
Yeah.
And now it's like, who knows? But up in Tolowa, 3 hours away.
Yeah.
You can go see him.
Yeah. If someone watching this is thinking, like, what can I do to support porcupine populations, what can other people, what managers do to support porcupine populations, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of it's what you can do to support general mammal populations is like, hey, trying to maintain a good habitat, you know, avoiding huge interactions, you know, don't leave food out, things like that.
Yeah.
Then a lot of the direct prosecution, of course, too, you know, like, don't kill the porcupine,
harass the porcupine,
you know? I mean, it's general stuff like that, but then also drive slow, you know, watch out for them. That's the biggest one, if you want to leave with anything, is watch when you're driving, don't try and run over porcupines.
Yeah.
It's so sad when a lot of the observations that you see is just dead ones. And then also make those observations, you know, contribute to citizen science.
Yeah. Every observation counts.
Right, yeah. So, unnaturalist.org, shout out. And then talk to people in the community. I think that's shown great ability to do that for us on this project, is being able to communicate with people in those areas and see what you can learn from other people upwards. Yeah. But yeah, don't run over porcupines.